Hook. You ever have one of those moments where someone pushes your last button then instantly regrets it? Well, imagine this. A power-hungry HOA Karen marching up your driveway waving a clipboard like it's a weapon, demanding your wife leave your own home. Now imagine her face when my wife quietly reached into her purse and pulled out her military ID. That was the day everything changed, but trust me, what happened before that moment? It'll make you angry, proud, and maybe even tear up a little. So sit back, because this story isn't just about an HOA feud, it's about respect, sacrifice, and what happens when you mess with the wrong veteran's family. It was a warm Thursday afternoon when I first saw it, a crisp white envelope taped to our front door. The sun had already started to dip behind the pine trees, and the neighborhood was quiet, except for the faint hum of sprinklers and kids riding bikes down the cul-de-sac. I remember the way my stomach dropped when I read the bold black letters stamped across the front. Notice of violation. We had only lived in that neighborhood for 6 months. My wife, Emily, had just come home from her 3rd deployment overseas. She'd spent 9 years in the Air Force, and this was supposed to be her time to rest, to breathe again. The move was meant to be a fresh start, peace, community, a sense of home. But apparently, peace wasn't on the HOA's agenda. Emily came out of the garage, still in her gym clothes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. A small streak of grease across her cheek from adjusting her motorcycle chain. "What's that?" she asked, wiping her hands on a rag. I handed her the paper. "Apparently we violated some HOA rule. Again." She sighed, unfolding it. "Let me guess. The mailbox is a 1/4 inch too tall, close. This time it was about her motorcycle. According to the HOA, her black Harley wasn't aesthetically appropriate for the community. Never mind that she kept it spotless, parked it neatly in the driveway, and rode quietly. The letter demanded we remove the vehicle from the property within 48 hours or face fines and possible eviction procedures. Emily laughed at first, not a happy laugh, one of those sharp, disbelieving ones. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. But behind that laugh, I could see something else, a flicker of exhaustion, frustration. After all, she'd been through months in sandstorms, sleeping in tents, patching up wounded soldiers. The idea that some HOA president named Karen thought she could evict us over a motorcycle was almost insulting. That evening, we attended the HOA meeting in the community hall. I still remember how Emily straightened her back, wearing her Air Force jacket, calm but firm. I admired her strength. I knew she didn't want to fight, but she also wasn't going to be pushed around. Karen, her name actually was Karen, unbelievably sat at the head of the table. Perfectly coiffed hair, pearls around her neck, and a glare sharp enough to cut glass. She looked at Emily like she was a troublemaker straight out of a movie. "Mrs. Thompson," Karen began, her tone sugary and condescending, "we appreciate your service, truly. But this is a family-oriented neighborhood and certain appearances must be maintained." Emily tilted her head. "Are you saying my motorcycle makes me look less family-oriented?" Karen smiled thinly. "I'm saying it's disruptive, loud, not in keeping with the community's standards." I felt my fists clench under the table. "You've got landscapers running leaf blowers at 7 a.m., I said. "That's fine, but her bike isn't." Karen ignored me. "We'll need you to move it immediately, or we'll have to escalate this. The board can pursue fines or, in repeated cases, eviction proceedings." Eviction. That word hung in the air like smoke. Emily didn't flinch. She just looked Karen dead in the eye, her voice low but steady. "You know, I've been in places where people were blown out of their homes. I came back here to build one. You really want to take that from me over a motorcycle?" Karen blinked, flustered but trying to recover. "Rules are rules." Emily folded the letter neatly and tucked it into her jacket pocket. "Then I guess I'll see you tomorrow when I file my response." We walked out together, the fluorescent lights buzzing behind us. She didn't say a word the whole way home, but I knew something had shifted. The next morning, Emily opened the top drawer of her dresser, pulled out her old Air Force ID, and placed it carefully into her wallet. She looked at me and smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Let's see if rules still apply when respect gets involved," she said. And that was the start of the day. Karen learned the hard way who she was dealing with. Next day, the air felt thick. That kind of quiet tension that settles before a storm. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when Emily came down the stairs wearing jeans, her old bomber jacket, and her calm, steady look, the same one she used to wear before a mission. "You ready?" she asked. Always, I said, though my heart thumped a little harder than I wanted to admit. She smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'm not going to yell. I just want her to see me. When we stepped outside, Karen was already there. Of course she was, clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd been sucking lemons since sunrise. 2 other HOA members stood behind her, nodding along like backup singers to her performance. Good morning, Karen said curtly. I was just about to leave another notice. Emily crossed her arms. You didn't have to. I got your message loud and clear. Karen gave that thin smile again, the kind that never reaches the eyes. Then you understand that the motorcycle must be removed by noon today. It's not personal, dear. It's about preserving community standards. Community standards, Emily repeated softly, almost tasting the words. You know, where I was stationed, community meant the person next to you, the one who'd have your back, no matter what. We looked out for each other. Nobody tried to push anyone out. Karen's smile faltered. Well, that's different. This is a private neighborhood. And Emily interrupted, her voice calm but firm. No, this is our home. My husband and I pay dues, taxes, and respect the rules when they make sense. But what doesn't make sense is treating a veteran like she's not good enough for your neighborhood. Karen bristled, her voice tightening. I don't appreciate being accused of discrimination. This is strictly about the motorcycle, which violates. Violates what? Emily asked. Your sense of control. You could have heard a pin drop. The 2 board members shuffled awkwardly. Karen's cheeks flushed. If you don't remove it, I'll have no choice but to issue an eviction order. You have until noon. And that's when Emily reached slowly into her jacket pocket. My heart pounded. Not because I thought she was angry, but because I knew what was coming. She pulled out her military ID and held it out between 2 fingers. The sunlight hit it just right, the holographic seal gleaming. Her name, her rank, her service years, all there in bold, unshakable truth. See this? She said quietly. This is the reason you get to hold your meetings and your clipboards and talk about community standards without fear. This is the reason people like me, people who've seen things you can't imagine, come home and try to find peace. Karen's eyes darted to the ID, then back to Emily's face. You could practically see the gears turning, her confidence melting away under the weight of realization. Emily continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. I've spent years defending the freedom you take for granted. I've seen friends not come home, so you can live in a place like this, where the biggest problem is whether a motorcycle matches your flower beds. And now you're standing here, threatening to evict me from the home I fought to protect. Tell me how that makes sense. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. The 2 board members looked at each other. One of them actually lowered his clipboard. You're military? Karen finally stammered. Emily nodded. 9 years. Air Force, medic. I've patched up men and women so they could come home to neighborhoods like this. All I wanted was to belong. But if that's not something your HOA allows, then maybe you need to rethink what kind of community you're running. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. Then, to my surprise, one of the other board members, a middle-aged man named Tom, who'd mostly stayed quiet, cleared his throat. Mrs. Thompson, he said, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your service. I think this whole thing's gotten out of hand. Karen shot him a look, but Tom kept talking. There's nothing in our bylaws that prohibits motorcycles if they're kept orderly. I think we can drop this. Karen's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She just muttered something about needing to review the documentation and turned away, marching back down the sidewalk with her clipboard hugged to her chest like a shield. Emily watched her go, then quietly slipped her ID back into her wallet. Didn't even raise my voice, she said with a small, tired smile. I laughed softly. You didn't need to. You won the second you pulled that ID out. That evening, as the sun set behind the houses, a few neighbors stopped by. One brought cookies. Another, an older man who'd served in the Navy, shook Emily's hand. About time someone stood up to her, he said with a grin. For the first time since we moved in, I saw Emily relax. She sat on the porch with her helmet beside her, sipping iced tea, the sound of her bike cooling in the driveway. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't even about the motorcycle. It was about dignity, about standing up for herself when someone tried to take it away. As the neighborhood quieted, she looked over at me and said softly, people forget that freedom doesn't just happen. Someone's always paying for it. I nodded. Yeah. And today, someone got reminded. The next HOA newsletter came out 2 weeks later. A new section had been added, honoring veterans in our community. Karen's name was still on the board, but her tone in meetings was different, quieter, more careful. And that motorcycle, it's still in the driveway, polished, shining, and standing proud. Just like Emily. Final message. Sometimes it doesn't take shouting or fighting to make someone see the truth. It takes calm strength, the kind built through sacrifice, respect, and pride. This wasn't just a story about a Karen getting put in her place. It was about a woman who'd given everything for her country, finally claiming her right to live in peace. Because at the end of the day, no HOA rulebook can outweigh the value of honor.